Left of the box. Recently, like March 27th recently, Justin Trudeau has come out with announced upcoming budget measures, and in particular, he was talking about a renters' bills of rights, and I think it starts around here. So I have a few articles to go over about it, and yeah, we'll see if there's anything that needs to be read between the lines with this.
Now, the foundation of a good life is stability. That starts with a place to call home. We know that one of the biggest issues people are facing is being able to afford a place to live, whether you're making mortgage payments or rent. This morning, I want to talk about renters. In today's Canada, more people are renting than ever before, and that number is growing at double the rate of those able to buy a new home compared to a decade ago. Nearly two.
Maybe you should get into why that is, Justin. Why are there more people renting? You might want to mention that. Just saying.
Thirds of young Canadians rent their homes, and they spend a greater share of their income on housing than other generations. And in cities like Vancouver, where we are today, this is even more true. This is the most expensive city to rent in the country. Renters matter, and young Canadians put a lot of their hard-earned money towards rent. We think that should count for a lot more. So today we're announcing new protections for renters and new pathways to home ownership. As part of our upcoming budget, we're going to create a Canadian Renters' Bill of Rights. It would create a nationwide standard for lease agreements, give renters a clear history of apartment pricing so they can bargain fairly, and make sure they have more agency.
I'm sorry, but he is so out of touch to think that just because we know what the last tenants paid in a building, that the landlord is going to be more accommodating to a new tenant. There's no rent control. Do you really think that landlord will then negotiate with people? Be like, well, the last tenant was paying this, so, instead of increasing the rent by $500 when you move in, I'm going to increase it only by $400. Like, he doesn't get that renters don't have the option to bargain or negotiate. That's not what the renters do. There's so few affordable rental units available. People will throw in added things like, oh, I'll give you this much money up front, or I'll pay you this much more in order to get this. Like, there's actual competition for affordable units that the landlords can do whatever the hell they want. There's no negotiating. None of that. The landlords are the ones in complete control of the situation, and they get to determine who gets in and who doesn't and what the terms are.
We're also going to launch a new legal aid fund that will protect tenants against unfairly rising rents, rent evictions, and bad landlords. And finally, we're going to help you make your rent count towards you becoming a homeowner. We'll do that by making sure that the fact that you pay your rent every month, which, remember, is a pretty significant amount of money.
Why is that?
That payment and that demonstrated reliability that you've shown over months and years is taken into account when you apply for a mortgage. We're going to amend the Canadian Mortgage Charter and call on landlords, banks, credit bureaus and others to make sure that your rental history is taken into account in your credit score.
I don't know if that is the good thing he seems to think it is. It's not credit scores that are keeping people from buying homes, for one thing. Also, notice some of the language that he's used so far. He says that he wants to stop rent increases that aren't fair. What determines what is fair? Is it the renters or the landlords? Like, who gets to determine what is fair? And here he just said, we're going to call on banks to do this. We're going to ask them, basically. There's nothing he can do to force them to do this. He's going to call on them to do this. And the idea of rent payments going towards your credit score, you know who that harms? That harms the people who are living with poverty, people who are living with disabilities, people who hit a rough time and get behind on the rent. You know, that difference in credit score isn't going to help somebody buy a house, but it will harm people in their credit from doing anything else that requires it if they fall into that unfortunate trap of not being able to pay their rent for so many reasons. We'll get more into that.
This will make it easier to qualify for a mortgage or even qualify you at a lower rate. And just think about all the other things that'll come from having a better credit score. A loan to help you start a small business, for example.
Yeah, because that's what we all want to do. We all want that loan to start a small business. You know, that's what we need the money for, you know, instead of like groceries. If only. We'll get into this. So this was another statement that he released on the Twitter.
If you're renting right now, you're going to want to hear this. Our upcoming budget is going to make renting fairer. That means making sure you can see what previous tenants of your apartment paid so you can negotiate a fair deal. It means making sure that your rent payments are counted by the bank towards your credit score. It doesn't make any sense for someone who pays $2,000 a month in mortgage payments to get credit for it, but not someone who's paying $2,000 in rent.
Okay, Justin, did you just hear what you said? $2,000 for rent. That's the problem. That's the problem right there. Not that it's not going towards the credit score, but the fact that it's $2,000 for rent in this country. That's the problem.
And we're bringing in new rights and protections for renters so that you don't have to stand up to rent evictions, bad landlords, or rent hikes alone. It's all part of making renting fairer, and it's part of giving you a leg up for when it comes time to buy your own home. This is what our
How many people in the younger generations realistically think that's ever going to be an option for them at this point? Buying their own home. No. Like it's there are more people renting, as he said. That number is drastically increasing because home ownership is just not an option anymore for so many people. You know, even couples with high incomes. Owning homes are just so unattainable unless you're a multi-millionaire. He is doing this. This is the performative bullshit that I'm so upset about, that I was talking about earlier. There's no teeth to this. There's nothing he can do to actually change this. This is just him saying this to try to make himself look good. This doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't actually help anyone.
upcoming budget is going to do to focus on making the housing market fairer for every generation.
And as the person who quote tweeted this says, if I went up to a Toronto landlord and said, I'm here to negotiate a fair deal for this apartment, he would laugh, throw me off the roof, and tell the next tenant my broken body was a lawn ornament and charge them an extra $1,000 a month for the privilege of looking at it. Yeah. I feel that one. That's kind of... Oh, I can make that bigger. There we go. That is accurate. No tenant gets to negotiate, what we get. There's no negotiations that happen. That's not how it works. And Justin Trudeau is too fucking out of touch to understand that's the reality for people who are renting. So Claire Blackwood just also adds, to be clear, rent housing affordability is a failure on many levels of government and so many governments. It's not just this announcement, but the messaging here is so removed from the reality of renters' experiences right now that it threatens to help the opposition. It's frustrating. Yes. The housing crisis is not something that can be fixed by one thing. It's going to take all levels of government working together, implementing a vast array of legislation, of cracking down on corporations, on landlords, on greed, in order for anything to change. But then you have the problem of the conservatives always wanting to fight back, especially when it's provincial conservatives and federal liberals They don't want the Liberals to have any win, so it's constantly fighting to not let anything get passed. And considering how many people in the government, how many MPs and MPPs are landlords, the likelihood that they're actually going to pass legislation that helps renters, it's absurd to think that that this is a reality. Like, it's ridiculous to think that they would pass legislation that would harm their profits, their income, their margins on their properties. Especially since the opposition is led by a little weasel who absolutely does not know or care what it's like to rent now and will stomp on the lower renting classes the second he's able to grasp power in his slimy little paws. I want to be excited about stuff that helps renters. I'm sick of seeing my friends get fucked over by bad landlords and the market. I'm happy they're acknowledging that it's difficult, but there's so much ignored here in a time of rampant government information and that's worrying. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Misinformation, misleading information, definitely. So this is from CTV News. Here's what Trudeau says the upcoming federal budget will offer renters. The federal government will create a Canadian Renters' Bill of Rights, which would require landlords to disclose their property's rental price history to prospective tenants. Again, that doesn't change anything other than letting us know what we already know, and that rents have been increasing at an exponential high rate. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the announcement Wednesday in Vancouver, saying it's one of 3 new measures that will be part of upcoming federal budget, which will also include a new housing aid fund and push to have rental payments affect credit scores. Whenever they talk about new housing, it's always, what part of it is affordable? And like, screw that. It needs to be social housing. We need socialized housing. We need, somebody mentioned, I just glanced over in the sandbox that, the government needs to buy out these landlords, force them out, and then, they need to do that and then socialize the rents. Make it affordable, like really affordable. Get rid of these corporations that are just bleeding us dry. But they're not going to do that when we have so many fucking landlords that work within the government. Rental demand outpaced supply in most major markets across the country last year, according to the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corp. Review published in January. The average purpose-built 2-bedroom apartment went for $1,359 per month, while condo rental costs at $2,049. Okay, that is woefully under the market rate for a 2-bedroom right now. I don't know where they're getting the average purpose-built from, because that is extremely under, like, by about $1,000. Canada's overall vacancy rate fell to a new low of 1.5% last year because there's no new units being made or being made available. Let's just say there's enough rental units out there right now to house all unhoused people 6 times over. Like, enough empty properties. It's just if they're actually being used for rental properties, or are they being used for B&Bs? Are they just being left empty because it's an investment property and it's not actually something they care to rent out? Like, there's so much more. Like, we can get rid of all short-term rental things like Airbnbs. Just get rid of them. And we can, buy out empty properties to actually make them into rental properties. Like, you can convert old buildings into new, like, change the zoning, all that sort of stuff. We'll touch on zoning, actually, when it comes to fourplexes and Doug Ford and his whole NIMBY attitude in just a moment right after this. Tenants' rights advocates have long championed the concept of a rental registry, which would allow renters to see what the previous tenant paid for a unit before accepting a new rate. The incoming Bill of Rights aims to empower renters to bargain fairly, a Wednesday press release said. Alongside it, Trudeau promised $15 million fund for provincial legal aid services to protect tenants against unfairly raising rent payments, rent evictions, or bad landlords. Again, you have that unfairly. What defines what is fair? Who gets to define what is fair? It's not the tenants. We don't get that. It's all in the language, because whenever you hear, oh, this is an affordable home, what they mean, the technical definition of that, is 80% of market rate. That doesn't make it affordable in the vast majority of cases. And so here it's like unfairly, but who gets to determine that? In today's Canada, more people are renting than ever before. Nearly 2/3 of young Canadians rent their homes, he said, adding that younger people spend larger portions of their incomes on rent than other generations have. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Larger portions of their incomes being spent on rent. There's the problem right there. Having this Bill of Rights, you need to change that. Having rent payments go towards credit scores doesn't change this. Maybe young people want to start a family, but they don't know how they can afford something bigger than a one-bedroom apartment. The new rules would require significant buy-in from provinces, which could be a battle. Cedric Dussault, a tenants advocate with Quebec-based organization, says. And there again is you read between the lines and how effective this is, the whole promising promises that the Liberals does. They need buy-in. They can't just do this. The provinces have to agree to it. They have to work with the provinces. The provinces that are conservatively run will not do it, even if this is something that would greatly benefit the people of the provinces. The Conservatives won't let it go because they don't want the Liberals to have a win, which is why very little in this country ever gets done. So it's nice that he's announcing this Bill of Rights, but in practicality, how this is going to play out, what actually happens, nothing. This is the performative bullshit that Justin Trudeau does. This makes him look good to announce this, but nobody will follow up with him to see if any of this is enacted. And very little of this will be, because you need the buy-in from the provinces, which he's not going to get. So the Cedric says, to be frank, we're not sure this is really up to the federal government to enact, he told CTV News in a phone interview shortly after Trudeau's announcement, which he called surprising. Cedric also threw cold water on the aid fund for provincial organizations. It's better than nothing, he said. It seems like a lot of money, but when we look at the whole country, at all the needs of all the tenants across the country, it will be used up quickly. Housing disputes can take years to make their way through courts, Cedric explained, while staff salaries and legal consultation fees could also go up. We're facing an explosion of demands from tenants, he said. Building credit scores. The government will also amend the Canadian Mortgage Charter and call on banks and credit companies to incorporate rental payments into Canadians' credit history, the press release said. So again, call on banks. Can't force the banks to do it. He's just suggesting that they do it. They can't force the banks to do this. And when Justin Trudeau talks about it, he only talks about the positive aspect of it. The people who pay their rent regularly and how that would benefit their credit score. And he doesn't say how detrimental this will be to the people who are struggling. He leaves that part out. But also, the banks have to agree to this. The credit companies have to agree to this. So he says this will make it easier for you to qualify for a mortgage or even qualify for a lower rate. Lamenting that property owner can build, well, we kind of covered that. You're spending $2,000 a month on rent. That gives you no kudos. It gives you no credit, he said. There's the problem. There's the problem right there. It's the $2,000 a month. And Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland announced earlier this month that the 2024 budget will be presented on Tuesday, April 16th. Noting that Canadians continue to feel the squeeze of inflation while increasingly becoming preoccupied with the looming mortgage renewals, Freeland signaled that the budget would focus on housing affordability and jobs while balancing the need to remain fiscally prudent by limiting major new spending plans. Oh, great. Yeah, let's start doing the whole neoliberal thing and cutting out all the programs that people rely on. Oh, so frustrating. So frustrating. This won't help people. This is just a performative bullshit measure from Justin Trudeau. So for the people who are confused as to what this means, it means nothing, because He's announcing it, but there's no guarantee. In fact, there's very little guarantee that any of this will be enacted. It's just wishful thinking. And he could put it in the budget so well, but, still needs the buy-in from the provinces, calling on banks to do it. And depending on how long that process takes, but come the next federal election, he's not going to be in power, and the Conservatives will completely scrap all of it. You need municipal, provincial, and federal to actually work together for a change, to lower the crisis of housing, to get that under control, to lower the affordability crisis. You actually need all levels of government doing their job and working together for the benefit of the people of this country, as opposed to the corporations and wealthy few, and the wealthy few who tend to be part of that government.